he was talking about working over in Abu Dhabi for a newspaper over there called The National, and I've been doing some writing for a couple of papers, and I guess at that time we were coming out in the middle of a recession, so job opportunities were going to be quite few and far between. And at that point, I was like, maybe there's something in me, if I need to go and move to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, I've heard lots of people are doing that.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Retrospective. Again, it's me and Chris, as it should always be, I'd imagine.
Will always
there shouldn't be a change to that one. This week we're joined by Thomas Chick. Sorry, how are you, mate? I can see you've got your son with you there. This is a first for us.
Yeah, I'm good. We have an additional guest today with my son Leo. This is, I guess, the secret of working from home, especially during this isolation lockdown period where we're all kind of we're all trying to kind of adjust to the setup and stuff. And so part of my adjusting is to be able to work whilst carrying a baby in a sling. So yeah, welcome everyone, and pleased to be here.
Yeah, so
it's showing us that real life aspect, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Indeed, absolutely.
Tom is a teammate, a new teammate, because I've moved cricket clubs to Aston Ingham. So welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the greatest cricket club in the world. Tom's a teammate, and then I got obviously a message from Carl, and he said, Tom does this, you'd be good on Retrospective, and here we are. So Tom, and for those of you who don't know what you do, just explain to our viewers, mate.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm a kind of official title is digital consultant. So I consult into an agency in London called Livewire Sport, who work with a number of big sporting organisations around the world, like Formula One, like Wimbledon, Chelsea, Inter Milan, NFL, Wimbledon. There's lots of big clients they work for, and I think my role for them is to kind of act as the head of strategy. So my background was that I worked for World Rugby for 7 years as kind of a social media manager, merging through to kind of digital manager, which meant I got a really good understanding of what it takes for an organisation, especially a governing body, to communicate with fans through the medium of online communication. So what I do now is I've taken that knowledge and I've paired it with a really strong agency, and with the number of clients they've got and the kind of wide-ranging scope of their clients, it means that we can offer, I guess, the best kind of practice for what they should be doing from a kind of marketing perspective, whether that's helping them sell tickets, whether that's just growing their fan base, whether it's helping with CRM, whether it's just creating engaging content. That's kind of what we offer as an organisation. Yeah, so my role is very much kind of helping drive the strategic thinking around why are we doing this, what's the potential monetization, commercial return on it, and how can we support all kind of stakeholders that are involved in the process.
Yeah.
No, it's all it sounds like you've got quite a lot of plates to spin there with that. Really. So essentially, you're the man in kind of the firing line in that sense. So you're in the PR ways, you've got to deal with the flack of people sort of coming at you and stuff like that. Or
I think at the moment, I guess it's really interesting, especially with the background of the organisation. My background is very much from a journalism perspective. So I trained in sports journalism. God knows how long a time ago, but I think journalism is kind of still existing, but it's more to get a little bit into kind of this online communication, which is very much a 24/7. Some of the thinking when I was back at World Rugby was that if you're a fan of rugby, you didn't actually have any way of communicating your viewpoints or to any of the kind of players, or especially not to the governing body. So we really wanted to kind of break those barriers down and provide a kind of a two-way conversation. And so that that obviously brings up a lot of positive side of things, but as you mentioned, there's often, especially if you're a governing body wanting to communicate, it does sometimes kind of bring up issues. And I guess especially in the here and now, with coronavirus kind of taking the hot seat, a lot of our, I guess, year-round communication strategies had to change, especially with the likes of Wimbledon being cancelled, Formula One races being cancelled, Premier League being kind of on hold for the foreseeable until it's kind of relaunched. So all of their kind of online marketing communication strategies have just kind of had to change. And I think what we've seen from that is a lot of creativity. There's still a place to be communicating, especially when people are maybe wanting to look at archive videos more because they've got a bit more time on hand if they're working from home or they're spending a bit more time at home. But yeah, I guess to your point about kind of being in the firing line, I think we are trusted with some of the biggest social accounts in the world, so there has to be a level of kind of understanding around what the right tone of voice is. If there is a crisis, how are we going to manage that to kind of prevent any kind of negativity. If there is negativity, we have community managers that will make sure that we are kind of steering the conversation in the right way, taking kind of any real kind of negative comments not down, because we obviously want the audiences to be able to kind of police themselves and communicate with themselves. But there's a big role from a kind of community management perspective, which a lot of the team will also take on.
Yeah, so you mentioned you originally got into sports journalism as the main tunnel. What sort of changed that sort of? Well, first off, actually, what I will ask you is what got you into that. Firstly, what was your the starting moment for you with journalism?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I actually did philosophy as a degree, and you'll have to excuse my bobbing around.
It's fine, man. It's fine.
You do as a parent.
Makes it even better. I think everyone should do it, to be fair.
I don't want anyone to get kind of motion sickness through watching me or whatever, but it's very normal to be doing this with a child. So I did philosophy as a degree at uni, and I think it was actually after a couple of months of being there that we were told, a room of about 100 people, that within that room only one of the, or maybe two people would use the degree for a career, i.e. you could go on and become a philosophy teacher or lecturer, and everyone else in the room is going to have to kind of think about doing some further education. So that was a little bit of, I guess, a kick in the teeth, having kind of, committed to doing a degree, going up to Manchester to do it. And to hear that quite early on was a bit of a kick in the teeth. But yeah, I guess it gave me an opportunity to really sort of think about what I wanted to do. I've always loved sport, massive passion of mine. And so, I've never been good enough to kind of compete from in any elite level. But I was like, okay, so if I like sport, what maybe can I do with my philosophy kind of experience? And I kind of realized that obviously there was a writing element, writing skills, and kind of thought, okay, well, maybe I'll sort of start thinking about maybe sports journalism. So I kind of started working for the local student magazine. I started doing some work for the local radio station, and it was actually working with the student magazine. I ended up going to a press conference for the, I think at the time it was the first ever UFC. Haas, you're probably interested. Yeah. Coming over to Manchester. So that would have been in 2000, early to mid 2000s.
Yeah, near that point, yeah.
And so, Michael Bisping was involved, Dana White, obviously, Forrest Griffin, around that kind of time that was really sort of starting to come over. So I ended up going to a press conference for that and just getting a real buzz for being involved with, sport. It wasn't actually sport that was particularly close to my heart at the time, but I realised there was something in it for me that I was like, okay, look, I really like sport. I've got some writing skills, and it kind of, I guess, it ignited something within me. I thought, okay, this is great. So I guess I pursued that on, and then went and decided to go and do a sports journalism course off the back of that.
Yeah, and so obviously you're not in the journalism world now as such, but what changed it for you, Reeve, from say journalism to sort of social media management, should we say?
Yeah, another really good question. So it was actually, during the sports journalism course, I just kind of rattled through a quick timeline. It was that we had a guy come and do a kind of guest lecture. He was talking about working over in Abu Dhabi for a newspaper over there called The National. And I've been doing some writing for a couple of papers. And I guess at that time, we were coming out in the middle of a recession. So job opportunities were going to be quite few and far between. And at that point, I was like, maybe there's something in me, if I need to go and move to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, I've heard lots of people are doing that. Maybe there's something in that. So I ended up having a conversation with him after the lecture. We ended up going for a couple of beers. And he mentioned that the then IRB, International Rugby Board, which then obviously became World Rugby, had a Rugby World Cup Sevens in Dubai in 2009. And he said he was going over to be a sub-editor. Was I interested in basically applying to be one of the freelance reporters? So I said yes. He put me in touch with someone. My then future boss basically went for an interview and basically arrived in Dubai for this kind of week-long tournament. Fresh out uni was brilliant, being over there. And what I guess I saw at that time, being a journalist, I came away from that tournament realizing that unless you were a fan in the stadium, I didn't know too much about sevens. Rugby was one of my big sports. I didn't know too much about sevens. I've watched a bit. Unless you were really kind of a passionate fan, like an avid rugby sevens fan, and you were, lucky enough to be able to find it on kind of the red button, or you were there in Dubai, you didn't really know what was going on. And I guess in my mind, they had a really opportunity because it was at that tournament that the IOC came along and decided that sevens was going to be in the Olympics in 2016, which ironically was my last involvement with World Rugby. And I guess I realized that there was a real opportunity to utilize more than just what they had from a digital perspective. So at that point, they had a website. and I think they were doing a little bit on YouTube, very, very minor stuff. And at that point, it would have been, you know, a 26-minute highlights program at the very best. So I guess I kind of pitched into them and said, you know, look, you've got Rugby World Cup coming up in New Zealand. You've got, you know, a potential story to be told from now to, you know, the Olympics in 2016. And I guess I kind of pitched in a role within social media and saying, you know, having done a bit of journalism, they did touch on social a little bit. So I had a bit of an understanding, and I guess we were kind of coming in at the right time. It was very, very new, very kind of infant, if you like, as a platform and a medium for communication. And actually they just turned around to me and said at that point, they didn't really know what social media was. They didn't really know if there was a place for it in the market. But about a few months later, they called me and said, actually, yeah, we think there's something, you're onto something. Do you want to come in and basically launch us on social media? You seem to know what you sound like you know what you're talking about. Do you want to come along and launch us and just kind of see where that goes? So that was kind of the real starting point. And then obviously, you know, the next 10 years is the rest. But that's kind of how it transitioned from journalism into social media.
So from there, you've transferred yourself over to where you are at now, which is at Livewire Sport. So
yeah,
sort of give us a bit of a background about, you know, what Livewire is as a project and, you know, what you guys do basically.
Yeah, sure. So I spent 7 years at World Rugby. You know, worked on a couple of Rugby World Cups, as I said. You know, kind of went to Rio and worked on the Olympics with Rugby Sevens, and you know, travelled around the world doing a lot of the HSBC Sevens World Series events, which I was, you know, very fortunate to do. You know, brilliant to travel the world and get paid to kind of to do what we love. But I guess during Rugby World Cup and coming to the end of the Olympics, I kind of felt like it was a bit of I guess the romantic in me felt, you know, as I said earlier, like in 2009, it was the first time that the IOC had decided that Sevens would go into the Olympics. It was Rugby Sevens. 7 years later, you know, the Olympics come along, and you know, having done 2 Rugby World Cups and stuff, I guess I felt a little bit like I'd kind of had my time, and I wanted a new challenge, a fresh challenge. So I actually hired Livewire as an agency for Rugby World Cup 2015 to come and support my social media team. You know, they're an agency I knew, I trusted, you know, very, very experienced in what they did. Great guys. I think that goes a long way, you know, really, really great guys. And so I built up a bit of a relationship with them. And then obviously ultimately they kind of took me on as a consultant after Rio. And as an organization, they've kind of, you know, their story is incredibly kind of motivating, if you like. And they launched in 2011. Basically, 5 ex-BBC guys set it up, and at the time it was a live blogging service. So you know, you think about my journey from journalism to social. You know, their journey is quite similar. They started as a live blogging service, but then they kind of they were fortunate enough to get Premier League. You know, big client as their first client, who remain a client to this day. And as they morphed and as they transitioned and as they grew and as social media kind of became more important, you know, they moved from sort of live blogging to content creation to channel management to video production. You know, our video production team, you know, and our creative studio, we call it a studio. You know, we have a completely separate office for that because it's just grown so much. You know, then the consultancy came in. We started thinking about how can we work with commercial partners, and then obviously the strategic side came in when we started thinking about how can we help with other things alongside that? So CRM, ticket sales, you know, fan acquisition, and just boosting people's kind of understanding of what an organisation does through, you know, incredible content. So, you know, in a nutshell, you know, as a whole, I guess we would call ourselves a content agency. But you know, we offer content creation, creative content. We offer commercial support. We offer consultancy. So, yeah, that's kind of what we do.
There's a lot of moving parts in there then, and it's all moved quite quickly from the sounds of it in the space of, you know, a matter of a few years, really.
Yeah, and I think we have to be on our toes. You know, as a digital agency, you know, we have to keep up with the trends. You know, there are a lot of moving parts, but you know, Livewire, we've got an incredible team. You know, very, very experienced, and obviously we are continually growing, and I think there's been an incredible kind of growth rate over the last 12 months, if you like, as you look at kind of full-time and freelance consultant. That's obviously been put on hold slightly based on the fact that, you know, coronavirus is here, but the coronavirus is a prime example of how we have to react and be quite reactive to what's going on in the market. But the speed of social, the speed of digital, and how new technology comes in, how the kind of the space changes on a regular basis. You know, we have to make sure that what we're offering to our clients is kind of, the best in class, best practice. It's pairing whatever assets, whatever rights they have with our understanding of the space, what works, what doesn't work, and then obviously bringing in our creative team to make sure that the content is engaging and it's ticking all those boxes around whatever the relevant business objectives are.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, how's the coronavirus affected sort of what you guys do? I mean, we spoke to Alex Spatt of Gimmick Sport yesterday, and he was telling us how this year, with all the Euros and all that sort of thing going on, that's been pushed back. How that's really impacted what all their plans were for this year. So how have you guys been affected by that in a slightly different field almost?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting. I think for the first few weeks there was I mean, clearly a lot of all sporting events were cancelled. And we still don't know when a lot of them are going to be coming back. But there's talk of some of them coming back behind closed doors. But as a whole, there was, and so on one side you could look at it and think, well, if there's no sport, what are you going to offer? And so there has been kind of a little bit of a hit. But actually, like I said earlier, what's kind of been really great to see is how all these sporting organisations, some of them alongside us, some of them not, in the industry, are just reacting to that space, because there's still a need for people to be communicated with. It's actually a really big opportunity for a lot of these organisations who often work on, I think back to World Rugby, we'd work on a 4-year cycle for Rugby World Cup, but within that 4-year cycle, every year there'd be a Junior World Championship, there'd be a Women's, Rugby World Cup every 4 years, there'd be a Rugby World Cup Sevens, there'd be 10 to 15 Sevens events, so it's very difficult when you're in that kind of environment, that space, to kind of have space to think about other stuff that is important, but maybe you don't get the time to do so. So things like optimizing a YouTube channel, we've seen how people are kind of looking at that now in this space and thinking about, okay, well, if we don't have our archive digitized, let's get it digitized. If we do have our archive digitized and we haven't really done anything, what can we do with it? If we aren't on TikTok already, maybe we should be. How are we interacting with our athletes and our players and our sports stars who are all in this situation together, and what are they doing at home to keep fit? How can we use their content still to provide content to the fans that want to actually still be part of understanding what's going on with their heroes? So it's impacted in a way. There is clearly no sport at the moment, so our kind of the live event stuff has changed slightly, and in some cases quite a lot. But from a content provision perspective, we're just having to think slightly, going down a slightly different avenue, but it's still very much part of what we're doing.
Yeah. So, what would you say as you've experienced through the years of social media, through the development of social media, the changes have been in what people have desired? Because obviously you know what people want, because that'll get the most clicks. So, what would you say has been the changes in that?
I mean, I think probably one of the it's a very good question. Storytelling has been a big change in terms of how things are told. We've often seen and known that evocative, emotive, human narration stories have a real big cut through when it comes to the social space. I think back to Rugby World Cup when the top 10 spoken about moments during the World Cup, 2 of them clearly were Japan beating South Africa and New Zealand winning it, but the other 8 were all actually related to something I guess off field. So whether it was Sonny Bill Williams giving his medal to the fan that ran off the pitch, whether it was the Romanian scrum half proposing to his girlfriend after they just lost to Ireland in front of a packed house at Wembley, Mario Bergamasco being chucked up in the air by his Italian teammates appearing in his 5th Rugby World Cup. So we knew and we know that that those stories are very engaged with. So I think the way those stories are told have changed massively. People are putting a lot more time into the way that story looks. Nike are a prime example of an organisation that does stories really well and tells them really well in a really emotional, evocative way. And I think that's a big one. The creative side of things has massively changed as well. You think back to 8 years ago, it was a case of maybe clipping up a try or a goal and then pushing it out there. Now sometimes we're seeing that because the market is so clustered and cluttered, by the time you might have your rights lifted, depending on what your rights agreement is, people will have seen that clip anyway. So how can you repurpose that clip in a different way for different channels? That's definitely something that's come to the front. And I guess we've also morphed from kind of short form video back really to kind of a longer form video based on what I was saying earlier about storytelling. Social, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram was very much about short form. But if you, with the likes of Instagram TV and, Facebook now being able to monetize longer form videos, YouTube kind of having a resurgence, there's a real kind of, a place for a kind of, longer form content. And it doesn't always need to be, really well polished stuff. You could think back, you could look back in your archive and, quite easily spend a bit of time just putting together some top 10s, top 5s from your archive, and which, could be 6 to 10 minutes, which is kind of the recommended length on YouTube for long form video now. And so that's, I guess there's 3 things there, and there'll be many, there are many more, but those are the 3 that kind of come to me as we're speaking.
Yeah. In terms of social media now, you've gone through the Facebook era, really, the Twitter era. Now we're going more into the TikTok era, if you want to say. How would you say your people have to adapt to the different platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, good question. You've asked some very good questions, Chris, I have to say. I mean, when we do part of what I do is also, if we engage with a new client, we'll offer a 6 to 8 week strategic audit, which includes, looking at getting under the hood in terms of what your business objectives are, what, if you have any, what are the social kind of objectives, KPIs, how do they fit in with what content you're producing, what platforms you're on, then going on to kind of benchmarking exercise. And I guess part of that is producing and ultimately producing a kind of an understanding of what channels are you on, and do they have a place in the market for you? If so, great, let's have a look at specific strategies, because I think a lot of organizations in the past have maybe had one kind of overarching strategy for all the channels, but in our minds, each channel is different. They all have different nuances, ranging from kind of what the content should look like, the length of content, as we've spoken, the tone of voice that's used with it, playing into, I guess, the different algorithms. And so, I guess when we start thinking about what channels should organizations be on, we look at the whole kind of spectrum and just understand, what's their resource like, if they've got enough people to kind of run the channels, because we wouldn't suggest launching one if they can't back that up. But I think when we think about, what channels to be on, with TikTok kind of having that emergence, we, as an organization, we have a good understanding as to all the platforms in terms of, growth rates and what kind of is a market trend in terms of, where should we be, where should our clients be across all the different ones. And I think, with TikTok coming out, it doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't, or, there's no need to be on the other channels, because they are still bigger. And the growth rates might be different, and, the monetization opportunities might be different, and the audience that you're speaking to might be different, and you can't do localized content, which you can do on some of them. So I guess when we look at the channels, we're always looking at specific strategies for each channel to understand, I guess, should we be on them? If we are, how are we going to speak? How is it different to the others? What are the opportunities within it? What's the different fan base? TikTok is very much a younger demographic compared to for Facebook, for example. So there's lots that we would consider when we start thinking about which channels to be on.
In terms of sort of an individual basis, alongside obviously platforms growing, obviously individuals also have to grow as new sort of technologies emerge and new skill sets are required. So how do you combat that constant sort of changing and that need to sort of be more well versed in those rounded abilities? So you need people who can not only write, but people who can video edit, photo edit, and all those sort of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as the organization's grown, we can probably be a bit more specific about the type of people that we're looking to hire. I guess video editing is clear. You can either do it, you can't. After Effects, you can do it, you can't. I could do a little bit, or I could put my hand to it, but it certainly wouldn't be strong enough or good enough to go on, a client's account, especially when we're selling kind of best in class, offering. So I think if we find people that can do a lot of things, great. That we've got a couple of them in the office that are very good at, community management. They can put their hand to some simple video editing. They can do kind of take on a producer role on a video shoot. And they're great and they're wonderful. But I think we're also seeing that, there's importance to have kind of specific skill sets. And those skill sets, as you said, have changed over time. I learned on the job a little bit in my previous role. I'm learning every day still now. I didn't know what TikTok was 6 months ago. I only, downloaded it a few months ago so I could get my head around it. But I would I would look inside the office to kind of, people did know what it was and had already used it either from a personal perspective or when we were starting to kind of launch them for our clients. So it's just a knowledge sharing thing as much as anything within the organization. Yes, we have to kind of morph and kind of grow as technologies change, but I guess part of my role is to make sure that I understand what's kind of going on in the space, in the digital space, whether that's picking up information from those inside the organization that know more than I do about certain topics, or whether it's reading up and learning and keeping on top of what other organizations from a sporting perspective are doing, and how can we kind of take some of that information and spread that around our client list.
Do you find it's harder to take people on though now with so many people having so many different skill sets? It's like the market's like quite populated in that sense.
I didn't hear that question.
Oh, sorry. I'll just repeat it for you. So,
no, I think it was just a...
Do you feel like it's harder to sort of find specific people with the market being so sort of strong and how many things that people can do now?
I guess I can only speak from the experience of the interview process that we've kind of gone through. We've been able to hire some really talented people that have been perfect for the role. I guess something else that Livewire are doing is we're offering this diversity and digital mentoring program where we understand that for some people getting into the industry has been quite challenging for various reasons, whether that's their race, whether that's their sex, whether that's a disability, and we've worked alongside Channel 4 for a few years and been able to place a couple of people from their kind of scheme. But a great guy from an internal perspective has launched what we've called a diversity and digital mentoring program, where we've gone through an application process. We've highlighted 13 people that have either had challenges getting into the industry, they want to get into the industry because of their kind of diverse background, and they've been paired with a mentor from within the organisation. So I'm one of those mentors for a guy. We've been matched up quite cleverly around what they want to get into. But our aim from that is, we know there's some incredible people out there. Our aim from that is that, hopefully that maybe to start with, maybe 25% of them become full-time members of staff, and our role is to make sure that, the others, we're helping them get into the industry, regardless of whether they work for us or not. Our role is to help them get into the industry they want to get into. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to hire more than that. But our main role within that is to make sure, as I said, that we're helping play a role in getting these guys into the industry. So, yeah, again, from my experience, there are a lot of talented people out there. Getting into the industry it can be tricky for a number of reasons, whether you've got a diverse background or not. I know sport is, sporting organisations, sports organisations, getting into sport. I was quite lucky with the break that I had, but I know that getting into the industry can be really tricky. But the right people are there. There's plenty of talented people out there. We see that when we receive job applications and stuff, and it's just a case of, I guess, sometimes receiving those at the right time when we're looking for a role, or vice versa.
Yeah. So moving on. So for yourself, how do you see Livewire developing? Is it going to be more clients? Is it going to be more employees? What would you think is the way forward for them?
I mean, you'd probably have to speak to one of the 5 directors about that, because it's their company, I guess. But from my perspective, that it's run by 5 great people, 5 amazing directors that are very much kind of involved. They live and breathe Livewire. But they've got some big aims, they've got some big ambitions around around where they want them to go. You look at the client list, and the client list is great. It speaks for itself. And before coronavirus, we were going to be growing a little bit more over the next kind of 6 months, but there's always more that can be done. So yeah, I see an incredibly bright future for Livewire, whether I'm involved or not. There's enough people there, and there's a wonderful team that could, I think in my mind they're a big digital agency. Certainly in London, potentially even bigger and wider than that. So there are obviously clients that we've not worked with that we'd love to work with, but I think the best thing about them is that the trust that we receive from some of the biggest sporting organisations in the world to be there, kind of, as you say, their man in the firing line, to be trusted with their accounts, that speaks volumes. And I think the other thing that speaks volumes about Livewire is those long-term, lasting relationships. Like Premier League we've been involved with them since 2011. Wimbledon for 5-6 years. So I think what we take from that, what we show from that, is that when we do work with an organisation, that they know they can trust us. They know they get a very comprehensive offering. They can trust us, and our experience kind of brings through that. But if you look back to last year, the client list grew. And I guess the other thing to say is, Livewire is not just about kind of your Wimbledons, your Premier Leagues, your Formula Ones. We work with a number of amazing kind of smaller organisations as well. We helped launch a new sport league last year, basically, called International Swimming League, and no one had ever heard of that before in terms of the sport, but they were kind of coming into the space, wanted to be a bit of a competition to FINA, and we kind of helped them with their social strategy and helped them launch on the social channel. So we've got as many of the big clients. We've got a number of, and I think what I'm getting at is that we don't see any hierarchy. We treat every single client that we work with in the same manner, regardless of if you're a Wimbledon or not. The offering we give to them is the same standard, same level.
Absolutely. And to finish from my point of view, and Hasan will have a couple more questions after me. Obviously, you got your little boy there. He's been very good, actually. To be fair,
I'm surprised he slept through this.
How in terms of being in the industry now, how would you say having your son has affected you in both obviously a positive way and in ways that have maybe stopped you from doing work, for example?
I think I'm really lucky that before coronavirus, I actually worked from home sort of 2-3 days a week anyway. So I used to live in London. I moved out of London, Livewire based in London. So I do travel back into London sort of 2 days a week roughly. So I was kind of really lucky that I did get to work from home and anyway. It's a really good question because there are positives in it. Look, I can be on a call with you guys. I can have my son asleep on me. And he's no trouble to be around. Obviously, if he was to wake up, the only reason I wouldn't necessarily want him on the call is not because I'm worried about perception, more because I don't want him looking at the screen. But his mum is here, and we can obviously share that load. So in one way, it's great. I get to wake up and kind of before I go to work, be with him and not rush out the door. Similarly, when I finish work, it's kind of there, and he can be involved a little bit during the day as well, which is great. And I guess challenges is sometimes this door here, I have to sometimes shut it if I need to be really focused. And that means that I guess there's a kind of energetic, I'm having to shut this now because I need to focus on the job at hand. But yeah, I guess in reality, there's not been too many challenges. Perhaps one of them was, when I am working, because there's a difference between working kind of your average, Monday to Friday. But I think with sport, weekends definitely are a big part of that. Before Leo, he's only 6 months, but for a lot of my time, for when I was at World Rugby, I was probably out of the country for 40% of the year, travelling to tournaments. Now, had I had a child at that point, that would have been a massive challenge. But I guess now the kind of the extension of that is that sometimes there's a lot of weekend work. So I was working on the Six Nations, which meant Saturdays, Sundays for 6 weeks were kind of written off. When we were working on the ISL, depending on where we're working in terms of organisations, we've got time zones to think about. So when the events were in America, I would sometimes be working through the night to 2-3 in the morning. If we're working on an event where we're not there, like a Sevens event that's in New Zealand, we're having to do social offering during the night. That's when it can kind of get a bit challenging because not only is it kind of longer hours, you get, I guess, the tiredness kicked in. So that's probably the biggest challenge is kind of the working hours in sport outside your regular.
In terms of going forward, sort of, how does obviously having a family and stuff affect any ideas that you wanted to do before that you may not be able to do now? So is there anything that you sort of wanted to change, or in that sense, is there anything you feel like has had to morph around that? He's only 6 months old, so maybe ask me again in a year's time, but I feel again I feel being a dad is great. I feel very fortunate in the role that I have. I know there's a lot of dads that have to not have to do go to work and leave the home for that. But there's been nothing that I would say that I would not be able to do that I would really want to do because of Leo. Thinking
I would still potentially go traveling and just bring him with me, you know, if that was to work. So I guess to your question, there's nothing off the top of my head that I can think would either not be doable, or I'm not currently thinking about that I can't do it, if that makes sense.
So at this point, like now, is this the sort of the point where you're happy to be and you don't really feel like venturing away from it or exploring sort of newer pastures, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy where I am. What's kind of going on, you know, as I said, the agency I work for are great. You know, they've been good to me in terms of the flexibility, and you know, I kind of see that not really changing. And I've obviously done some consulting for other organisations along the path since I became a freelance consultant when I left World Rugby. You know, I've worked with HSBC, I've worked with Google, I've worked with UEFA, I've worked with Asia Rugby, and done some other consulting along the side. And so this year is probably the first time when there's not been another client alongside Livewire, but I'm enjoying that space and that freedom of kind of being able to put all of my focus onto the Livewire project. And I think, you know, not necessarily having to juggle other clients.
All the different plates, yeah.
Yeah. So, at the moment I'm enjoying everything that's going on, and so no reason to change yet. Who knows what happens in the future?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I think maybe a few years ago I would have thought, you know, would I want to go back into kind of, you know, maybe a director of digital role? You know, there was a few that came up that I was sort of headhunted for. None of them felt appropriate or right at the time. But you know, the other thing is my lifestyle. I know that would involve going back into London maybe to kind of work full time, which I'm not sure I want to do, if at all, again. You know, there's something in kind of working for yourself which does kind of bring a bit of freedom and flexibility that wouldn't be there with a full-time role. So yeah, not for now.
Not for now. Stay as it is for now. So if you were to speak to your younger self and, you know, give yourself some advice, obviously knowing the journey you're going to have over your sort of career, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, great question. What would I say to myself? When you say younger self, what age are we thinking?
When you very first started, so literally just fresh out of, we'll say fresh out of college.
Okay, fresh out of college, fresh out of uni. What would I say to myself then? That's a really, really good question.
You know, if there's a particular life lesson you've learned during that period, or a particular way to tackle challenges, things like that, really.
I mean, life lessons is I could probably give you some life lessons. Maybe slightly differently to sort of work lessons, but I guess the life lesson would be just enjoy the journey. You know, trust your instincts, trust yourself. You know, have fun. Listen to your body. You know, there's plenty of space within that. From a work perspective, I guess I would probably just say, you know, yeah, keep putting in the hard work. You know, you've kind of built you'll be able to kind of get to where you want to go. Not that you necessarily know where you want to go. But yeah, just keep putting in the time and the effort and the dedication.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way to finish. So thank you very much, Tom and Leo, for coming on.
Big up to Leo as well.
He's definitely getting a reputation on the work Zoom calls at the moment. So
there you go. And so this is yet another episode of Retrospective. We will have plenty more coming for you every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. So there we go. It's scheduled now. We've got ourselves a little.
Unless you do what Chris did yesterday, forget to schedule it and schedule it half an hour later.
Yeah, exactly. All right, listen.
Life lessons already there.
Don't expose me. But anyway, yeah.
No,
that is the end of Retrospective. Has take us out, mate.
Tom, if you want to tell us where we can find you and your work, you know, on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to follow me on social media, my Twitter handle is TomChick. What is it? It's TomChick85 or TomChick43. There you go. That tells you a lot, doesn't it? That's how little time I spend on my own channels, because I'm spending so much time on other channels. But my Twitter handle is TomChick43. If you fancy follow me.
Yeah.
Perfect. And make sure to check out Livewire as well. I think I've got somebody I know that works there actually. Not long started with you guys. So yeah, no, I've been aware of you guys for a little while, but yeah, no, make sure to check them out and make sure to check our next episode out. Whoever that might be, I'm not sure who that scheduled one is at this point. We're filming these so far ahead, it's unreal. I'm losing track.
This one's May 26th. This goes out. So yeah, The next
Make
one
sure to check this out then.
yeah, please check out now. And the next one will be with Tim Hall, professional golf player, and coach and businessman as well. So there we go. That's about it.
And the next episode I think that comes out specifically is Derek Ray, if I'm not mistaken. So make sure to check one out. That was a good one. But yeah, until then, we shall see you soon.